Our recording is going, so I will go ahead and start. So, good morning, and thank you for attending the environmental compliance training for the FM 1835 bridge replacement over the Double Mountain Fork of the Brazos River. This presentation is designed to help us stay compliant with federal permits that we have received for this project. So the FM 1835 project area overlaps with two small fish called shiners, the sharp-nosed shiner and the small-eyed shiner. You can see these two guys over here. They are tiny little nondescript fish that exist in that murky water. They're really hard to see. The species was once found across 3 river basins in the state and in several large stem rivers and their tributaries. You can see on this map, all of these had one or both of the species in it historically. Now, after population declines due to several reasons, both of the species are restricted to the red lines on this map. So their range has been reduced significantly. Their species population has declined a lot. And because of that, they are federally protected under the Endangered Species Act. Because we're taking place in one of the few rivers where they are found, that's important to know and be educated about for our contractors. The project also takes place within designated critical habitat for the fish species. That means that not only are the fish protected here, but the habitat is federally protected as well. And I want to note that the habitat extends 98 feet outside of the wetted channel. So on the screen, you see where the river is. And outside of that, you can see these lines. That is the boundary of critical habitat. So all of that area within those bounds is protected habitat. Harming the fish or destroying fish habitat is illegal in this situation. And if it's found to happen, it could result in project delays, fines or penalties, or even criminal charges and imprisonment. So we want to make sure that we are following the law here and complying with the permit. The permit that we received is from Fish and Wildlife Service. We submitted a document called a biological assessment, which commits to what our project activities will be and what our conservation measures will be. And if we change those, we need to talk with the service again because we are legally required to follow what is in that document for the permit to apply to our project. This document down at the bottom of the screen is the biological opinion, and that is what our permit is that allows us to do the work at this site. So I'm going to walk through what conservation measures we need to follow before and during construction. First, we are required to have contractor training for everyone that is working on the project, especially those within the water. We're working on that today, so that gets a check mark. We also need to demarcate critical habitat on the site. And on the project plan set, we have that outlined. There is an environmentally sensitive area sign that we are supposed to be using where that critical habitat starts on either side of the river. We are required to keep stockpiled materials and equipment 100 feet away from critical habitat, outside of that critical habitat. And we need to install our stormwater controls appropriately and in compliance with what we have in the plan set, specifically these rock filter dams. Now, if something on the SWP3 sheet is not working in the field, we can modify that, but we want to make sure that it's in a way that we are still stopping any sedimentation from the project from entering the river. During construction, we need to avoid work in the water between April and September. That's the peak spawning season. These fish eggs float down the river. That's how they disperse. And they are particularly sensitive to large sedimentation loads. And so and vibratory disturbance or getting crushed. So that's why the service wants us to stay out of the water between April and September. If we have to be in the water, we need to have a biological monitor on site while we are working in the water. The same goes for any dewatering activities, which by default would be in the water. We need to have that biological monitor on site. We need to be paying attention to if it floods. If the stream gauge nearby raises 2 feet or more over the monthly median in a short time, then indicates a flood is coming, and we need to make sure we are not in the water. And it's also good practice to make sure that any of our equipment or materials are removed from the water path as well. The bridge demolition of the existing structure must be done so that no debris reaches the ground within critical habitat. We want to make sure that all of that is being removed so that nothing's disturbing that protected habitat. We should not be destroying or removing more existing vegetation than necessary. So they want to make sure that our sediment from the project is not being released into the stream and harming the fish. And the best way to prevent sediment from from escaping our project is to not disturb the vegetation that's there. So I know we'll need to disturb some vegetation, whatever is necessary for the project, but whatever is not necessary should be left in place. And any loud or vibratory construction activities should take place between October and March. That's outside of that peak spawning season, so that hopefully we're not affecting any eggs or reproductive effort on the fish's part. After construction, we need to make sure that we're removing all of the temporary structures, the supports, and any accumulated sediments in the construction footprint. So whatever we mess up or disturb or change during the project, we need to make sure that we're getting that away from the river after the construction is finished. We need to revegetate with native species, which is the standard seed mix within our spec book. So that's already included. And remove all temporary erosion and sediment BMPs once final stabilization is reached. And this may or may not happen at the end of construction. So this may be a district job instead of a contractor job, but it needs to be done. Okay, so I just wanted to walk through a few situations we want to avoid at this site. Like I said, the service is very concerned with sediment being discharged into the river. So we want to maintain our stormwater controls. If you can see at this project this picture on the left, there's a stockpile of erodible materials, and the silt control fence that's going around it is not working, right? The stockpile's too close to that fence, it's overlapping it, and those sediments can escape the project site. On the right, they probably had this set up appropriately, but it wasn't enough to handle what happened. Sometimes things happen, but it definitely has failed and needs to be maintained, cleaned out, and replaced. If we end up with any dewatering on the site, we want to make sure that we are following appropriate TxDOT protocols. There's dewatering guidance that we need to follow. And again, if dewatering happens, which I don't think it will, but if it does, we need to have the appropriate biological monitor on site. One of the best things we can do to avoid scrutiny from the public or our regulatory partners like Texas Parks and Wildlife or Fish and Wildlife Service is to keep the site clean. If Fish and Wildlife Service drives by our site and it is messy, then they'll likely call us, let us know that there's a problem. They'll document it and they'll be inspecting our project site. So if something is out of compliance with the permit, that's when they'd find it. We've had that happen at other project sites, and they were on non-busy roads where a service employee happened to know about the project and drove by it, and things were not looking good. And that was a situation that took a while to resolve well. So keeping the site clean and tidy is the best thing we can do to avoid that. And lastly, on this set of slides is avoid placing any portable toilets in a manner that if it got knocked over or it flooded, it would be pushed down into the river. That's the last thing we want, is to release any of those chemicals into the water. Okay, so in summary, this is short training, but it's important to remember that the fish and their habitat are protected by law. If we don't follow our conservation measures, if we're working in the water out of the wrong season, if we're dropping things in critical habitat, especially if we're doing something like that on purpose, we're in violation of the law, and we don't want to do that because we don't want to delay the project. We want to avoid fines and penalties, and certainly we want to avoid any criminal charges or imprisonment that could occur. So things happen on a construction site. If something bad does happen by accident, it's not the end of the world. The best thing we can do is communicate that with Fish and Wildlife Service. So if something happens, please contact the construction inspector, Pat, or me, or the next environmental coordinator that Abilene has. So feel free to call or reach out, even if something bad doesn't happen, but you have questions or you need to change something that's in the plans or a conservation measure. That's what I'm here for. Please reach out and I'll work with you to find a solution. So that is the last slide in English, and I think it might be good to answer any questions if you had any.